Welcome to our second webinar in our Return to Play webinar series. We're happy you're here with us today. So our series is designed to help give coaches, trainers, athletes, and others in the exercise science field the knowledge they need to help keep their athletes or themselves safe and healthy as they return to play post-pandemic restrictions. Today, we'll be discussing athlete body recomposition through base training and nutrition with Dr. Victoria Burgess. She's the CEO of Tactical Athlete Nutrition and Performance. She's a former firefighter and paramedic, and she is a Guinness World Record holder, having been the first female to paddleboard 115 miles from Cuba to Key West in under 28 hours nonstop. She's also an adjunct at Concordia-Chicago, which is one of our hosting universities today. A little bit about Concordia-Chicago. Concordia offers bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs in exercise science. The courses are 100% online and asynchronous, which means you can balance work, school, and your family or personal life. You can complete your master's in 12 to 18 months. There is a 50% transfer credit available to students, and CUC has a tuition guarantee, which means your tuition won't change on you while you're studying with them. If you're interested in any of these programs, please feel free to message me directly. A few final housekeeping notes. We will have time for questions at the end, but if you have any that come up during the webinar, please feel free to speak up during the presentation. And on that note, I'll pass things over to Dr. Burgess.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Naomi. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in today. This topic is a very broad topic with lots of information that varies among all the different sports out there. So while a lot of the sports are similar, there are a lot of differences as well. So my goal for you this presentation is to get you all thinking about your specific sport and bring home ideas to your athletes to get back to where they were pre-COVID without injury or overtraining. Like Naomi said, I want to encourage everybody to have discussion throughout this presentation. Share with us what you're currently doing, so don't be shy to speak up, and we can all learn from one another. So on that note, we'll get started. So what is physical fitness? Physical fitness obviously is comprised of a couple of different things: cardiorespiratory fitness, muscular endurance, strength, power, speed, flexibility. Most sports include all these aspects, but some tend to lean towards one type or another. So it's important as you start to decide what you're going to be doing base testing, that you kind of figure out where your sport leans to, so that way you can kind of get a general idea of where you're going. Next slide. Okay, so for the importance of base testing, I don't know how many of you here have been doing base testing before COVID. Maybe it's part of your protocol for your university or team. Maybe it hasn't been. But right now, since we've been out for some of us over a year now, it is very important to start thinking about testing measures when it comes to performance and body composition. These measures allow us to maximize the athlete's performance, decrease injury, and just allow them to get on track. I've talked to a lot of different coaches throughout the last several months since they've been getting back, and some of them have implemented some base testing, and they've seen a lot of improvements over the last few months. Now that we're kind of in summer season and off season, for the majority of us, some are going to be coming into fall and starting right away. Others we have till spring. So it's just really important to kind of see where each athlete is at. They haven't had the access to the equipment that they usually have. They haven't had the access to the coaches they usually have. So just sticking them in there and like letting them play without knowing where they're at is seeming to be the problem at the moment. So this is why it's really important to start base testing if you don't already. Have any of you, I'm not sure how many are in here, but have any of you started base testing, or are you currently base testing? Anybody want to share what you're doing at the moment? Anybody do base testing on their athletes like throughout the season in the fall? Okay, somebody said in the fall. And of course, this varies among sports. So you can go to the next slide. We'll talk about that. So for base testing, and we'll talk more about it later, but right now we want to base test post-COVID. I call it like post-COVID base testing. Typically, people base test when they start a program and then intermittently throughout the program. Before you test, though, you want to consider your actual sport. There's tons of different questions you can ask about your sport. You could see some on the screen here. For an example, the intensity of the sport, like is there intermittent movement like soccer, or is it steady state cardio like cross country running? Is the movement initiated from a completely stationary position like football, or is it continuous like soccer? Does the sport require a change of direction? Are you going side to side, front to back? Do you need quickness, reaction time? So when you start looking at your sport, you really want to evaluate what the main movements are for that sport, because this is what we're going to be focusing on with our testing. When it comes to body composition and fueling your athlete, we want to decide what energy systems are being used predominantly. Are you using aerobic or anaerobic systems? And this will help us complete a fuel plan for our athletes. Not sure, have any of you guys done any of these questions at all? Do you have any questions on the questions for your specific sport? Well, if you don't, but if you do, just take notes, maybe start making a profile of your sport, a summary of your sport. Many different questions you can ask with your sport to try to just make that summary complete. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so the basics of testings. Like I said before, testings can be done in the beginning of a training program and periodically. Typically, in season with testing, I like to do quarterly. Out of season, you can do it a little more regularly. It just depends on you and your season, how it's set up. Also, how your athletes are training. Some athletes perform all year round, especially here in Florida. We have good weather all year round, so they typically tend to overtrain actually a lot of times. So some of the principles for testing are developing an athlete profile, creating maybe a notebook or whatever it might be that you have to have this profile that you keep on them throughout the season. You are able to then evaluate their training program. Is what you've designed for your training program actually working? What might need help? Where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are, monitoring their health status. And a lot of times if they do get injured, you want to monitor their progress during rehab. I know a lot of times this is where PTs come in, but we want to know as well as coaches, where are they at? So that way, a lot of these, especially the high school and university age athletes, they are coming in, especially now with COVID, and they don't want to show any weaknesses. They just want to get right back at it. They're all hungry for more. They're ready to go. They don't want to show weakness because they'll feel like they're going to get kicked off the team or whatever it might be. So if we can monitor them so that way they don't get injured because they're going to stay silent, that would be ideal. So first we have to evaluate the sports and the body parts that are being used. For an example, most sports obviously use the whole body, but there are some sports that use upper limb or lower limb. For an example, upper limb would be something like golf with their swing or a javelin throw. Lower limb predominant is something like a long jump. Other than that, the majority of the sports are involving the whole body. Where are you guys at with your sports? Anybody want to write on the notes so I can see who's in here? What do you coach? If you want to just stick it up as we go along so I can kind of see and maybe I can refer a little more towards those sports, feel free. Okay, you can skip next. So there are a lot of different types of tests out there. Research has shown valid tests throughout many different sports. So when you do pick a test that you have for your sport, whatever you do, just make sure it's been proven to be valid and reliable. I listed a few different tests here that are commonly used, but they're not the only tests that you can use. So when you are making your summary of your sport, maybe you can go in, go on PubMed, look at the valid tests out there and kind of pick which ones you want. We'll go into that a little more later, but you can see here some of the types of tests that we have. Flexibility tests. I like to do flexibility tests in all my athletes. I think it's really important and it's overlooked a lot, unfortunately. Not many of us. I'm not flexible at all. I know a lot of athletes, they just want to go out, play, and then go back home and chill. So we don't focus a lot on flexibility, but flexibility has been shown to decrease injury. It's also been shown to help increase performance. So one of the tests that's the most simple test is the sit and reach test. I'm sure most of you know how to perform that test already. You don't really you have to have a sit and reach box to do this. I actually have made one out of plywood. So if you can't afford the ones online, you can make one out of plywood, but it's a very useful and reliable test. It's been shown for over the many years to be a great flexibility test. So that's one of the flexibility tests. So strength tests for your strength athletes. 1 rep max has been shown to be awesome for measuring strength. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing it on upper body strength, lower body strength. It's been shown to be reliable throughout the whole entire body as far as strength goes. The hand grip strength test has also been shown as a good strength measure as well. If you guys also in the chat want to post up when we're talking what tests you've used or have used, feel free to do that as well, because I see a lot of people writing, which is awesome. For vertical jump test measures maximal lower body explosive power. So for these things, it's going to be good for sports such as basketball or volleyball. That explosive power, you can use it on other sports that are going to be implementing a lot of sprinting, like tennis, things like that. So that does require a specific equipment. As you guys know, it's a really tall metal thing, and you vertically jump test. But that has been shown to be a very reliable tool. For a speed test, the sprint test, usually 20-meter dashes are good for things like baseball players or basketball players where they're dashing short bursts from one base to another or up and down the court. 100-meter swim tests. Actually, in swimming, I've read studies on everything from 50 meters to 400 meters showing reliable results. So, you know, when you're evaluating your athlete and maybe what distance they're actually swimming, take a look at that specific distance for your test measures. For cycling, if you guys have cyclers, a 40-meter sprint cycle has been also shown to be very valid and reliable. So just different sprint tests, and you can see here how you might have to separate it to apply it to your specific athlete. We don't want to have a baseball player do a 100-meter sprint like a swim test, right? So this is why it's really important to figure out your athlete, what they actually need. For speed and agility, the most commonly used one is the shuttle run test. And go ahead for the next slide.
It looks like in the chat we have a couple people who mentioned their sports.
Oh, cool.
We have soccer mentioned. Someone says they have a wide variety of athletes and with the focus on military athletes.
Okay, awesome.
We have basketball, soccer, rugby. We have a PE teacher who's doing fitness testing. And baseball, we have a cyclist.
Awesome.
And football.
Cool. Okay. So, all right, that's fine. We'll keep going. And then, so for another type of test is the aerobic fitness test. This is great for all athletes. Most people do the beep test. Did somebody, I think, might have wrote that in here somewhere. But the beep test is great for all aerobic athletes. It's been shown to be a good predictor of VO2 max. So if you don't have access to VO2 max, the beep test has been shown to be good. For body composition, I'm not sure how many of us here have access to body composition machines, like the high-end ones like the BIA or DEXA. Skin fold is still acceptable. It has been shown to be reliable. It's not as accurate as the BIA or the DEXA, but if anything is better than nothing. The one thing I have to say about body composition, and really any of these tests actually, when you choose a test at the beginning of your program, make sure that as you test your athlete throughout the program, that you use the same test. I know it sounds like, yeah, of course, I will, but sometimes you'll read about some other test, you know, a few months later and think, oh, I wish I could do that. Let me do that now. And that kind of just keeps things all over the place. So we want to pick one, stick with one. Same thing for the body composition test. If you're going to use a BIA or a DEXA, use that same exact machine. If you're going to use skin fold, that's fine, but don't jump into the BIA next time because you have access, if that makes sense. You could do it for extra measures just to have that extra information, but still skin fold test them if that's what you did initially. Why do we want to know about body composition? Body composition is very overlooked in performance. Obviously, excess weight equals increased fatigue, but also, you know, especially right now and at the university level age and younger, like I said, they're probably out of shape. You know, a lot of them maybe have gained weight. So it's important that mentally we're aware of their mental health, that they're not trying to focus so much on losing weight that it affects their performance. So just knowing exactly where they're at with their body composition and where they need to go. BIA and DEXA, they give you things like skeletal muscle mass, fat percentage, which is what we mostly focus on, are those two. But at least you can see, is your performance training working? Where are they currently at? Where do we want them to be at? And also try to figure out how to work with them as far as where they are mentally with their own weight and their own performance. Because unfortunately, especially at that age, they look at that a lot and they're concerned with aesthetics, but they're also concerned with performance. So we kind of have to like work with both in order to figure out the best plan. You can go to next.
We had a question in the chat for how reliable are electronic scales for BMI?
Well, I don't like the BMI. BMI, it's not a very great tool. Unfortunately, it's a bit outdated. It's, you can have a person that has a lot of muscle mass and they are considered overweight with BMI. You can research, there are like a couple of scales out there that you can use that have like it has like this pull-up thing for your hands, kind of like a BIA device that has been shown a little bit reliable, but you have to watch which brand you get, and then research the brand, because there's so many of them out there and they're so different. But any scale is better than no scale, right? I wouldn't go off the BMI chart though. Any other? Okay. Okay, cool. So order of testing, this is really important. Like I said, you really want to evaluate your sport and what you actually need, first of all. We don't want to just be doing all these tests on our athletes because they seem fun and they are, but we want to make sure that they're useful as well. So NASM specifically writes what order they should go in based on performance. Obviously, you don't want to be doing the most strenuous thing before anything else, right? So here's the order of testing that NASM recommends. Obviously, the health questionnaire first, which a health questionnaire coming back into this year is actually something that I'm not sure if any of you do or are involved with the process of your athletes coming into your team, but it wouldn't be so bad to see maybe if anything has changed over this last year with their health. Biometric measures like heart rate, blood pressure is great to have. Make a paper, put their name, blood pressure, heart rate, good. As far as we go from there, that's when we want to do body composition. You don't want to perform before you do any body composition measures if you can avoid it. Then we'll move on to the other screening devices. So flexibility before all the other muscular endurance stuff. And if you look at this list, that's a lot of testing, right? It's really going to be hard to get these athletes, some of them, to be interested in testing all day long. You don't want them to test all day long. So if you could split up your testing into 2 or 3 days, even better. Maybe you do a testing assessment before practice one day, and then you practice. And then, a few days later, you'll do another one before practice. But you want them to practice after their tests, but you want to get those tests in. And if you could split it, like I said, better. Performance assessments for power, speed, agility, and quickness are ideally performed on different days for sure. You can do flexibility and muscular endurance because that would be just like a 1-minute push-up test, 1-minute pull-up test on the same days. But anything for power, speed, agility, if you want true results, separate days. Okay, you can go next. Okay, so test results are going to yield the results so you can create the profile for your athletes, right? How many of you, I think somebody in here, oh, maybe not. I thought somebody said something about they have a form for their athlete, but after you create this profile of your athlete, then you're able to set up the athlete's training program to meet their current condition. Like I said, right now we really want to pay attention to this since they are coming in kind of cold. You don't have to program them for their team practices necessarily, but you can alter these when they're in the weight room or when they're doing cardiovascular fitness, maybe even on their own. You could take them aside and sit down with each of them separately and discuss where to get them from where they were before pre-COVID to where they are now post-COVID, kind of post-COVID. Do any of you have measures from pre-COVID that you guys have kept up to date and kind of are using as a gauge currently? And you could speak too if you don't want to type. Anybody? No? Maybe? Well, if you do have test measures that you used before, take them out. That's awesome. If you don't, it's fine to start now. But you can see now how important it is to actually do this kind of stuff, because who knew this was going to happen? Who knew we were going to lose our athletes for a year and a half? Are they where they were when they left a year ago? Now we don't know.
The thing that we're mostly seeing right now is the fact that athletes are coming in concerned about their weight, and instead of fueling for performance, they are under fueling. In turn, they are having poor performance because they're too worried about their actual body composition as far as it goes with losing the fat mass that they gain, instead of increasing their performance. So as coaches, it's really important to just put an emphasis on the significance of fueling properly. If you are able to measure these athletes on a BIA or DEXA device, you might be able to find out more specific information as far as their resting metabolic rate. So you can discuss with them their total calorie intake for during the day, but at least stress the importance of pre-fueling during your workout fueling and post fueling. So if you have these results, if you are able to body composition test, at least you can use this time for nutrition education for the athletes. We know that they lack in that area. Unfortunately, we don't talk to them enough about the importance of fueling before, during, and after, and eating enough calories throughout the day to supplement their exercise. So if we are able to get them on these devices, it opens up a whole new world of maximizing their performance and taking advantage of that type of test as well. You can go ahead and, who here actually has body comp their athletes?
We also have a lot of people in the chat. I think someone a while back asked a question about what questions you have on forms for athletes.
Okay, what forms you said?
Yeah, what questions you have on general on the forms, with like questions regarding nutrition or questions regarding family history?
Yeah, so they make different actual forms, like a PAR-Q form is one of them that has the actual health information that's kind of like standardized. So it'll give you that whole list of what might or might not even be applicable to them, but at least they'll have that whole list. It's called a PAR-Q form. So that's a good thing to use for the health questionnaire. The way I personally develop my form as far as like making an athlete profile is I'll and it doesn't have to do with the health form unless there's something that's significant that stands out, in which you would turn them over to their physician or specialist anyway. But I develop a form that you basically put their name and kind of like a profile form, height, weight, age, and then the test that you perform underneath it in an Excel form or whatever you might have. It has different areas that you can follow them throughout the year.
Then we have quite a few people in the chat saying that they've done body comp before, with, it looks like, tactical athletes or through the military.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I pulled it up here. I can see it. Yep. And the InBody is a really valid and used machine. They always are updating, so that's also a positive thing. A lot of recent studies have been used with the actual InBody. An InBody is just a BIA device, bioelectrical impedance analysis device, but it's the brand. It's a brand of that device. So yeah, that is a good way to measure is through the InBody, which is a BIA. Have you, the people that have used the BIA, have you all been able to see increases in either body composition goals or performance goals by using that specific device? Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, and it's one of these things where before you start testing, base testing or performance testing, whatever you might want to call it, or body composition testing, you really don't know the actual tool that it is unless you start doing it and actually charting it. When you start seeing the athletes in performance improving significantly, when you're able to get those numbers down and those measures down, because you're able to really hone in on what they need help with instead of just throwing them out there and watching them perform. They might practice a lot, they might have good skills, but if you can see where you can improve, because everybody has weaknesses, all of the athletes have weaknesses. So if we don't test them, specifically, it's hard to find those weaknesses unless they lose, right? And then we're like, oh, what did we do wrong? But if they win, then we're like, oh, they're doing great, they're winning, but really they can even be even better. So that's why we want to implement these tests even without COVID, but especially with the whole COVID thing. You can go, I don't know if there's a next slide. Is there a next slide? Summary. Okay, so basically the summary is just what I said, how important it is for developing training programs and nutritional programs using those base tests. It is very sports specific, so I recommend just trying to create a good sports summary, what you are currently coaching or what your athlete is performing in, and sitting down with them and talking about even their goals, especially right now with them just coming back. We don't know where their mindset is, so it's important to find that out. And then just basically going from there. I think that if everybody, starts to implement these things, we will avoid that overtraining. We'll avoid the injury thing that might be going on right now with everybody trying to jam in extra work from this year that they missed. And I think you will see good results. Does anybody have any questions? I'd love to hear from y'all. I know there's a lot in the chat I'll read through. Has anybody, that's a question I wanted to ask is, has anybody been seeing specific issues post-COVID with your athletes? Have you been noticing weaknesses or what's been going on with your world out there? Because I know there's a lot of different sports coaches here. Anybody? Any issues? Maybe not. Well, either way, I would definitely, hey, Eric, what's going on? Eric, what have you noticed with your athletes coming back? Okay, folks who tested positive, it's a slower return. Yeah, so, and that's a whole other thing is how to work with an athlete who's actually tested positive and had those longer term effects. So this can be related to having someone obviously come back like with an injury, right? So these somewhat shortness of breath, yep, atrophy, yep. So these tests will actually help you bring them back just to a general play, not even to peak performance play. So that's a good point right there. Just even looking at that as kind of like I don't want to say like an injury, like bringing an athlete back to injury, but bringing them back from COVID symptoms is huge. But just in general, have you seen athletes come in that are healthy that have just been off all year? What's been going on with that? Have you seen a decline in performance? Have they been able to keep up their performance? What do you guys think?
And there's a comment of mostly athletes experiencing atrophy, breakdown in sport-specific skills, and mixed emotions of training. Okay.
Yep, that's definitely.
Athletes back into the routine. Yep.
Yeah, and I've heard that some from the coaches that I've discussed with here locally as well, especially the mixed emotions of training. It's been interesting because I feel like things have been trickling back in, so they haven't been necessarily going full-fledged. So to get that motivation back for these athletes after they were going super strong before, and then a lot of people lost motivation throughout that year and a half. So yeah, it is out there for sure. And with that, this is a good way to help those athletes get motivated if they're able to see those results. Even if you didn't base test before, where are you at now? Like, where do you want to be? Where do we need you to be? They can go in, and if you don't discuss this with them, or if you don't have numbers that you can actually look at, some people love to look at numbers, right? they're just going to be like, okay, yeah, I got to come and I got to play and I got to win. But if you have these numbers like, okay, hey, this is where you're at, this is your speed, let's make a goal for you. So we can put in these shorter term goals, get them remotivated, so that way they come into the season strong with that mindset as well. So that's just another, it's another aspect of, even if it's not a college athlete, a high school athlete, or any athlete, even if it's just a personal client, how to get them remotivated if they don't plan on doing an event for a while because they don't feel like going to events yet. Well, you can pull up their numbers, you can base test them and tell them every quarter, I'm gonna retest you. Let's see where you can get. So it's a good motivational tool as well.
Someone in the chat said they've seen a loss of conditioning, but the folks who could keep training have maintained really well. And another person in the chat said it's challenged their coaching abilities to address these shortcomings.
Interesting. What do you feel like has challenged your coaching with their shortcomings or their decline in performance? I think who is that? Oh, motivation. Yeah. Yep. So that is definitely, I think motivation that's like the hardest thing about coaching, right? And actually I think right now as a coach, it's even hard to be motivated as a coach, which might be why you're feeling that as well. Because really it's hard to motivate even when they're going strong, but we just are doing it naturally because everybody's in the groove of things. Willingness to engage, that's interesting. Yeah, if it's not a sports team too, if they're not made to come to practice, if they don't have to be there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can see where that can be a challenge as well.
We had someone say that they surf for fun, but they couldn't surf at all last year due to COVID because the beach was closed, and that it's been hard for them to get back this year, and it's been demoralizing, and they've experienced a loss of reaction time and quickness.
Yeah, so surfing is a skill-specific sport. So with skill-specific sports, I can see that decline as far as it goes with skills, but rest assured, those skills typically come back quicker than your fitness. So what I could suggest for athletes, or even, I think her name was Sharon, maybe just doing on-land training that you can control right now would be beneficial to your surfing. But once you get back in the water, you should be able to pick it up pretty quickly as far as your reaction time and stuff. The same thing with every sport too. If I'm trying to think of any other sport that might have been affected as far as not being able to, maybe weightlifting, if people are at the gym, competitive weightlifting, that might have been hard if you don't have the equipment at home. So you lose a lot of strength, but if you build up that training program properly, you should be able to get that strength back as well. Basically, with the time of COVID, like Eric said earlier, people have maintained. So if people were able to maintain just a little bit of fitness, of course, they're coming back a little bit stronger than those who haven't. For motivation, just doing these tests, I think is going to help like 100%, just trying to use those numbers as a motivation. So I think it was Geoff, maybe getting your athletes or your clients to start doing these base tests, just to develop that motivational plan almost. You don't have to tell them, but maybe just use it as a motivation tool to put in place for them to have a goal, to reach for a goal, and like almost to relearn how to make a goal, how to get to a certain area. We've kind of it only took a year to forget that. It took how many years to build it, and it takes a year to forget it. So let me see, I think testing of the goal setting has been a huge help. Okay. I think those that were interested in their sport would have done something or anything to continue some kind of training during COVID. I wish that was the case, but honestly, I haven't seen that in everybody. I know a lot of athletes, including myself, yeah, maybe the first like 3 months or so, it was easy to train and continue because we didn't think it was going to go so long. But even in my sport, I compete in stand-up paddleboarding, and even till today, the races aren't there yet. You know, it's hard to get to some of them. There's not as many of them, so motivation is you might be training still, but you're just training to maintain. You're not training really at the levels that you were to, you know, before COVID, when you actually had things to aim for. But I'm sure there are some very like motivated, focused people, but I would imagine that it's probably a little handful of them. But there are definitely a lot of people as well that struggled, no matter how intensive an athlete they were before. It took a toll on people. Okay, yeah, so cycling, no closure affected that, right? Internal motivation, exactly. So internal motivation is a huge factor for their training during COVID. But, you know, what we wanted, you know, is some people might have still trained during COVID, but where were they at? Yeah, if you're an individual athlete, it's a little easier to figure out where they were before and where they are after COVID, because you can use, especially race athletes, you can use time controls. But for team sports, it's a little bit more difficult because there's a lot more going on. There's skill set, there's fitness, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things. So that's kind of where a lot of these testing measures come in place, as far as the performance testing, just making sure that you are able to identify anybody who might be having trouble, because they are thrown in that environment where they're overlooked as an individual because they're playing in a team setting. So we want to avoid injury and overtraining in this case, and we want to maximize performance. So these individualized base tests will help you figure out what's going on with each person. Yeah, so Sharon with the road cycling, yeah, you're very motivated, so that's good. Does anybody else have any questions or anything that I might have missed in this chat, since I'm on my phone now? Let's see. I think we might have hit everything. Do you guys have any questions as far as nutrition goes or body composition questions with that, as far as coming back into the season or your athletes that you're training? Anything? I don't see anything. Well, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I think, Naomi, we probably will provide some of my contact info on the recording at some point or somewhere. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out. But if nobody has anything else, I want to say thank you for coming and listening. Sorry, I don't know what happened on my end over here. I froze. But yeah, I hope you learned something. I hope you're able to take something back to your teams and your athletes and your clients, or whoever you're working with, maybe even yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burgess, for being with us today. And thank you, everybody who attended our webinar. We really appreciate it. If you want to register for any of other of our Return to Play webinars, check out returntoplayseries.com and make sure you're registered for the upcoming ones. But thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you being here.